Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are on Zuhua Lake playing as the Dark Elves against the Dawi in a bit of a straightforward game, I suppose. There's not much to say for going into this one. I decided to go with a super blunt force build. I think those are the best ways to go against the Dwarves if you're playing as one of the Elves, because the Elves are just so many great nutcracker options in their infantry lineups. You can just swamp your opponent and then slaughter their infantry and then get into the back line usually. So for my lord, I decided to bring Crone Hellebron. Now, one of the things I didn't do here is bring a caster, and that was just a bit of an accident because I was originally going to run Malekith on a chariot, and then I figured, you know what, let's try something different. Let's run Hellebron, see if we can get good value out of Gaze of Cain. And before I knew it, I was all running out of time because my opponent was ready up, and I forgot to get a caster in there, so oh well. But Crone Hellebron isn't here. She's got nothing much. She's on a horse. She's got her Blood Frenzy. She's got Cursed Blade, Hero Killing Blow, as well as Gaze of Cain. So decent selection of items. Front line, we got 2 units of Blackheart Corsairs who are just there to soak up blasting charges, and if my opponent has some units on the flanks that we need to get into, we can flank around with these guys. Holy, that was a really wide arc, but hey, it illustrates the point. And of course, these guys are not terrible in combat against most stuff. Dwarves have anyway. Not much AP, but they do have armor of their own. They're okay. They're not terrible. 5 units of Hargoneth Executioners, one of which is the Blaze of the Blood Queen, so huge stopping power, huge damage output there. These guys will melt through most Dwarven infantry. I actually think they'll melt through like every Dwarven infantry, except maybe Norgrimling's Ironbreakers. We'll see. And out on the flank, we actually have a Sisters of Slaughter, and believe it or not, these are very hard for Dwarves to deal with. Dwarves don't have the greatest, they don't have the greatest tools to kill them. Maybe like shooting is okay, but these guys do have a shield save. They do have physical resist. They've got poison, so in melee they're debuffing enemy damage output 2 times. It's actually a 40% combined debuff between the poison and the physical resist. Stacked on the monstrous melee defense, and Dwarves don't have much with good melee attack really in their roster. So there's not too much they can do against Sisters of Slaughter besides shoot them, but you can usually shut down shooting fairly effectively. Unfortunately for me, or I don't know, it doesn't necessarily. I don't know if it's necessarily unfortunate, but I only brought Dark Riders as my harass here because I had a little bit of points left over and I forgot a caster. For my opponent's build, he went super offensive, so he brought Grumbrindle with Flash Bomb with Rune Axe, I think, and Foe Seeker, and Grumbrindle knows no fear. A Thane with Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught, which I would not recommend. Thanes currently are in a bad spot. They need a buff. There's not much else to say there. Bunch of miners on the flanks here for my opponent. He's got 2 miners with blasting charges, 1 miner in the front. I guess not on the flanks, in the front. Then he does have a whole front line of Longbeards with great weapons, 4 units of them, backed by 2 Ironbreakers. In the back, 2 units of Slayers covering for an Organ Gun. So the Organ Gun, of course, very potent, trying to blast through these Blackheart Corsairs, but they're going to get on top of these miners before they can get all the blasting charges off and shut them down pretty good. And you can see Hellebroken here running amok. She's already up to 11 kills because she hit these miners and got that sword effect on them. The Blackheart Corsairs here soaking up those blasting charges like absolute champs. And Hellebroken's going to get in there, and she's going to start hitting them pretty hard. You can see they're taking like 4 models off. The drain effect is going to proc. They're going to start taking some hurt. And now the mob is just pushing in. Really going to start beating these guys up. And the miner's not having a good time of it. In the meantime, Hellebroken is going to start swinging around. One of my big problems here is that these Ironbreakers are trying to work their way around the flank. My opponent is trying to actually set up a nice little barrage here with his blasting charges, but we can't have none of that, so we're going to dive in with Hellebroken. We're going to pop our ability there and get on top of these Ironbreakers. And you can see she's already doing some decent damage. Those blasting charges are probably doing more friendly fire than otherwise. Elsewhere, you can see, unfortunately, our riders get immediately routed, but my opponent has been forced to use Grumbrindle, has no fear. The crew was taken offline for a little bit, which bought me some time to slaughter this front line. And in the meantime, the Sisters of Slaughter, they're worming their way around the flank. They're going to be able to start slaughtering those Slayers and getting into a good spot. In the meantime, here with the Murder Party going down, of course, these guys will not break. They're going to fight to the bitter end, but they're taking some monstrous damage in the process. And eventually, the Hargoneth Executioners, they're going to slaughter them. They're going to get through these miners, and my opponent's not going to be in the greatest spots. In the meantime, Hellebroken over here slaughtering the Ironbreakers. She is very good at killing infantry. She might be almost on par, maybe even on par with chariots in some cases for just killing infantry goes. She doesn't have the greatest survivability, but obviously with that crazy melee attack and weapon strength of over 500 and a bonus versus infantry of 20, even Ironbreakers with their high melee defense really stand no chance. Now, unfortunately, we are going to get pressured here by the Thane, so we're going to have to cut and run pretty shortly. But you can see the Sisters of Slaughter, although not killing the Ironbreakers, are definitely tying them down. They're whipping them all over and just buying me time. While Helebron here, you know, she's fighting. She's fighting a good fight. Doing okay against the Thane, actually. But all over, my opponent's army is starting to buckle. Rumbrindle Knows No Fear has run out. The Sisters of Slaughter here diving in against these Slayers, and they're absolutely taking them to Pound Town. You can see they've barely taken a dent. 3 models lost. They're just whipping these guys, hitting them with that poison, of course, debuffing them a whole bunch. With their non-existent armor, Slayers just aren't able to hold up all that well. Sisters having an absolute field day here against these stunties. These guys are huge. Like, look at them. Like, they're supposed to be dwarves, but they're like way bigger than this. I don't know, this is like such a. They don't seem like dwarves. They're like stocky bar fighters, it seems like, more so. I don't know, but regardless, they're getting dragged down pretty quickly by the Sisters. I get a unit of Harganeth in there as well, and of course with Murderous Mastery or Murderous Prowess going down. I actually have Murderous, and that's another cool thing about this build. Almost all your units have Murderous Mastery, so as that procs, it of course lasts longer on them. It gives them greater benefits, and suddenly we're able to just hack and slash our way through these Longbeards. This is a terrible engagement here. You don't want your troops boxed up. Now my opponent's going to get surrounded by this very wide line of Harganeth, and it's just going to start falling apart here. With these Longbeards, and at this point it's basically just a slow and steady massacre. These Longbeards over here, or these Ironbreakers over here, are starting to fall apart. Even these Ironbreakers just falling apart to the rear charge of the Black Corsairs and Executioners. Grumbrindle, you know, he's in there, he's fighting the good fight. He's not bad, but he's definitely getting slowly dragged into the muck. Hellbroken, in the meantime, is somewhere. I'm not even sure where. Where's she at? I don't know. There she was. She was out here helping out the Longbeards. Of course, she's getting some value out of her Cursed Blade, getting in there and destroying this Thane completely. Or I guess she's not. I guess surrounding buddies, but still doing rather well. The Dark Riders have managed to take that crew offline for good, and with that, my opponent's army is essentially a goner. Their Slayers are dead. They actually got wiped to a man by the Harganeth Executioners. The Sisters back here. The Ironbreakers they'll try. They'll try. But they don't really stand a chance. These Sisters finally broke. Only 18 kills. I do believe Sisters actually beat Ironbreakers in a protracted engagement if the Ironbreakers don't get their charges off. I could be wrong. If I'm not correct there, somebody notify me or tell me. But in the meantime, my opponent's army is going to suffer army losses here, and it's going to be GG for the Dark Elves. It was a bit of a one-dimensional strategy. These are kind of the bane of dwarf builds, in my opinion, is one-dimensional blunt force trauma style strats where you just push in, pile in, and slaughter your opponent very, very quickly. It might seem perhaps a little cheap, perhaps a little uninspired, but I have found these to be the best strategy, or this to be the best strategy against dwarves. Dwarves always have to invest in tools to crack large. They've always got to invest in some form of dealing with artillery. They're usually going to have some counter. There's some shooting to zone off your shooting. So if you overinvest super heavily in infantry and AP infantry, essentially, you can just swamp dwarves. They're not going to be able to fight you off. They'll have tools that aren't really optimized for the situation, like a lot of tools on the field that aren't optimized for that situation, and you can essentially just sweep them aside. Like, let's take this situation here, for example. My opponent was forced to bring double Slayers, essentially forced to. You need some sort of anti-large, and this is about as cheap as you can get, really, with anti-large as dwarves. Honestly, I don't think this is, like, again, if your opponent brought a lot of large, I actually think you'd be in quite a lot of trouble here. But regardless, he was forced to cough about 1,800 gold for Slayers. Whereas I paid only 500 for Dark Riders to do some harass because I had some money left over. But otherwise, there isn't a single target on my roster. That's a good target for Slayers. He's got essentially 1,300 gold committed to something I didn't commit anything to, essentially. Similarly, Ironbreakers, they don't really have much of a point here. Like, they're meant to disrupt and blast apart squishy infantry, but squishiest units I have are Sisters of Slaughter, who I kept conveniently out on the flanks where they weren't going to get blasted immediately, and the Black Corsairs soaked up the blasting charges with some help from Helebron, distracting those charges as well. So I think what you get is that my opponent here committed very heavily. He had to commit to certain things. He had to invest in certain things. And he just doesn't get the returns on some of those investments. Whereas I basically know that my opponent, the only thing my opponent could have done here to throw this comp in a loop was bring gyrocopters. which probably would have been a better investment for me to bring like 2 harpies or something instead of make some cuts here somewhere and to get like 2 harpies on the field. But otherwise, this build, like, I basically knew what my opponent was going to bring, give or take. It's going to be very heavy on infantry. It's going to be a mob of infantry, so just swamp them, and it's a good way to go against dwarves. So. Good game to Ollie here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully found it a bit informative. And I don't know what to say about this matchup, other than most of these matchups where you just swamp with massive elite infantry. It's kind of the dwarves' weakness. I do hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below to keep up with additional content. If you have any comments, any criticism of your own, be sure to share them. I'll do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.